The Brandon Peters Show may contain explicit language and detailed plot points. For more information on the show, stay tuned to the end of the episode. And now, here's Brandon.
I'm very excited to bring you the Brandon Peters Show this week. And for many reasons we'll get into shortly, but perhaps the biggest reason is my guest, whom I'll be discussing Charlie Chaplin's 1940 film, The Great Dictator, with the director and filmmaker and artist of the award-winning short film, Stormchaser, Gretl Claggett.
Hey, Brandon.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
To the show. So welcome to this week. Wednesday this week is my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. We're also inaugurating a brand new president that day, but most exciting, this Great Dictator episode is finally happening. And I think the episode sort of wanted to be this week and fought its way, because this is not the first time Gretl and I are going to talk about everything happening on this episode. Unfortunately, my laptop's hard drive kicked the curb when I was editing her last appearance on the show back when we recorded in 2020.
In 2020, it was actually, we spoke on December 28th,
yes.
2020, which feels like years ago now.
It does. That's why is it like that nowadays? Like,
I don't know, but it's crazy. But yeah, and I too. I mean, I'm so happy that you wanted to bring that up, that we had talked before, because
yes,
we had such a great conversation, and we're just talking about how The Great Dictator was so relevant, and many of the things that we talked about were so relevant and timely, and they've become even more timely.
Yeah, like it's crazy. We literally 2 weeks ago from right now, we're recording this on the 11th of January. It's dropping on the 18th. 2 weeks, exactly 2 weeks to the day since we last recorded, and it's been 5 years, and the world is a different place. Insanity. Like, how does that happen? But that's what the way the whole past almost year has been, because I think 2020 really starts in like March or February, end of February, March, and then it's still going now. So we should change New Year's to
right,
March.
And maybe after your birthday and the inauguration next Wednesday,
Right.
then will be 2021. Although I think that 2021, is basically saying, oh, you think 2020? Well, wait a minute, you haven't seen 2021. It's like, I'm going to compete with 2020.
Right. And that's what like 2016 did, 2017 did to 2016, and it's like, get us out.
Well, hopefully things will, things will get better. Hopefully, but it just seems that, like the volume just keeps turning up,
right.
up.
And
it's like Spinal Tap. This one goes to 11. No, it goes to 11.
And
2021 goes to 11.
Sadly, our recording right now, when it drops, when you're listening to it on the 18th, is quite possibly very dated. More stuff could have happened.
That's true. I
don't like it. I'm just stating the facts.
I hope not.
I hope our FBI and National Guard and people are able to not let things happen over the course of the next week and weekend leading up to the 18th. And it's just like, these people be crazy, and they're paying too much attention to that news, and we were way off. But oh man, this could be like a dated conversation. It's crazy. Our last one already is.
I know it is.
No one can hear it.
Anyways.
Only you and I know about that. But
right. Yeah, it is. I mean, and it's funny, even with even with Stormchaser, what I started hearing even more, I mean, of course, that phrase, a storm is coming, a storm is brewing, I mean, that has been used before. But I really heard that spoken a lot about last Wednesday. And, and they were saying the storm is coming, the storm is coming. Now, of course, Stormchaser is not associated with that storm. It is in a sense, but it's not.
Yes.
If you know what I mean.
Right.
But it is interesting how, I don't know, it's just, it's a very, I think that the fates decided that we had to have this conversation
They did.
now and to bring it up to date.
No, they totally did. It's just insane. Which let's get right into Stormchaser, your film, the reason we are connected right now.
Yes.
And it stars Mary Birdsong, Dominic Raines, and Stephen Plunkett. And do you want to tell people what it's about, like the general synopsis?
Oh, sure. So
if you're not tired of doing so.
Yeah.
Not just with me. I'm sure you've had to tell, be like, well, Stormchaser.
Exactly. No, it's it was, it's what is Stormchaser about? It's basically about a woman who always, wanted to just chase tornadoes with her dad because that's what made her feel alive and connected to Mother Nature, and so we see a little bit of that at the beginning of the film. And then we meet her in midlife and she's up against a recession. She's struggling to make ends meet, as so many people are today. And instead of chasing tornadoes, her passion, she's stuck in this joyless job, selling roofing, siding, and storm doors for a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of a fly-by-night operation, flip siding with this guy, Flip Smith, who maybe will remind you of, a leader on the world stage today, who I'm sure we'll be talking about. And basically, in creating this film, I mean, I was fascinated by the metaphor of a storm. I grew up in the Midwest in Tornado Alley. So of course I grew up with tornadoes, and I didn't ever actually chase tornadoes, but what I discovered in writing the film was that yes, storm chasers are people who are passionate about chasing tornadoes, but it's also a derogatory term for someone like an ambulance chaser. They call these, typically they're guys who go door to door and they're selling roofing, siding, and storm doors for shady operations that make cheap materials. And really it's disaster capitalism. So that's what Mary Birdsong, playing Bonnie Blue, that's the joyless job that she's stuck in, and she's really not very good at it, but she's got to make a living. Right. And so it really is an allegory of a lot of things. I mean, it deals with a lot of things: disaster capitalism, it deals with climate change, global warming, ageism, sexism, racism, definitely a divided America, a shrinking middle class, bullying.
You cover a lot.
Yeah, and at the heart of the story, really, her character has to make a moral decision.
Right?
Is she going to take the money, or is she going to take a stand and do the right thing?
Now, I've got a couple things around all what you just said. Yeah. So, for what all the topics that you cover in this, it's not like you're like beating everybody over the head of them. People probably can miss a couple if they're watching. Yes. How many of them were calculated, and how many of them, when you stood back from the script, did you just go, oh crap, that just came out of me?
Well, I think that, I started kind of with that core of the metaphor of the storm. The genesis, I'm a poet, also, as well as a screenplay writer. And so this is based on a poem from my book of poetry, Monsoon Solo, Voices Once Submerged. The poem is called Storm Secrets. Don Stuckey, whom Dominic Raines plays, was actually in the poem, was the storm chaser. when I started writing the script, I decided at a certain point to gender flip. And so Bonnie Blue, played by, the wonderful, fabulous Mary Birdsong, all the actors are just amazingly talented and really embodied the roles impeccably. But she became, so I did, I did a number of drafts and really liked having a female protagonist, especially you normally would not see a woman selling roofing, siding, and storm doors door to door. It's typically men. So I started with the metaphor of the storm and really tackling disaster capitalism, because that was kind of the hook for me, is this predatory capitalism. It happens, of course, with natural, during Hurricane Katrina, for instance.
Right.
There were storm chasers down there, storm chasers of the variety of selling you a roof that's going to blow off in the, next
Anytime there's
storm.
hail, those
Anytime
people.
there's hail. Also, another big scam is telling you that your insurance will more than likely cover it,
Right.
but really leading you to believe that the insurance will. And then, of course, like during Katrina, it was flood versus wind, or wind versus water. And so, people spend a lot of money, and then all of a sudden they realize that insurance isn't going to cover it, because it was water damage or it was wind damage, whatever. So disaster capitalism and global warming were kind of at the center. And then from there, as I kept doing rewrites and moving into casting and, the evolution of the process, the other, I really decided, like, oh, I want Don Stuckey. He's a guy who's stuck in his joyless job, but I really want him to be a person of color, a brown man in a white man's world.
Right.
And, we were very lucky to get the very talented Dominic Raines. I was very clear also with the Bonnie Blue character. She had to be kind of beaten up by life. So she had to be a woman of a certain age.
Yeah.
Hollywood would probably cast that role with a 20-something, maybe early 30s.
But they put glasses on her, so it's
exactly.
And she wears a flannel shirt that looks like fashion level, but
right. Like Daryl Hannah in Steel Magnolias. She got a lot of raves because they put glasses on her, and she was willing to be ugly.
Right.
So yeah, these other things then just started, and I definitely, funny because of now our interview and everything, and here we are in the moment. I really try to do that a lot of times with my projects. I whether it is poetry or a screenplay or whatever I'm working on, I have that core element, but then I definitely am always looking at the larger backdrop of the story. There's a very personal story, but there's always that world and that universe informing it. So I, in Stormchaser, as you probably recall from seeing the film and also from our previous conversation, I literally gave Flip Smith, who's brilliantly played by Stephen Plunkett, 5 verbatims from Donald Trump.
Right.
Literally 5 things that Donald Trump has said. Now, Plunkett is such an amazing actor, and he's not playing it that way. And I think what's incredible about his performance is he's always playing the positive, even though he's, the boss that you hope you never have. And we all probably have had at one time or another.
I've worked retail, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that sometimes, some people have caught those things and sometimes they don't catch it, but it's there. So I think that's the fun thing about creating worlds and about storytelling is that you can kind of pull these little nuances of the time. And yet I do think that even though Stormchaser is timely, and I did it as an allegory to really bring up some tough issues that we're facing today, I hope that it will stand the test of time for a while. I don't think it's so of the moment that it's not something that doesn't inform human nature and abuse of power and and predatory capitalism, I'm not sure how quickly those things will be eradicated.
Right. Well, I mean, whether they're in governmental power or in business power,
Yep.
or, like parents club soccer league power, they're going to show up. Like it's
Exactly.
a through line personality that we have not been able to educate, fix. People are people, and some people just want that person. They look to that person, they want to, because they could never be that, but that person makes them believe they can or something. But and I don't know, those people can be used in positive things maybe, but we never see them that way. Like it's
No, and it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing because I we have over the years, I don't think that America always did this, but I do feel like, for a number of years now, not
Mhm.
just in the last 4 years, but for a number of years, there has been kind of a glorification of bad behavior.
Yeah. Or no unaccountability for your actions, or just
Well, true that, right? Yeah,
considering we have, we have a social media internet atmosphere where you can just be a avatar and say, throw out what you want. It's now leaked into doing that in person to person interaction, and that's just
yeah,
not, it's not how
yeah.
it floats. And that things happen with that. You don't just get blocked by a user on an app. You have and freedom of speech, but that's not what it is. But yeah, that's kind of where we're kind of facing with. It gave people the courage to type these things to another human, or what they think is another human, and then they're like, I'll just display it in the real world, and it's not how human
Yeah.
to human works.
Well, and even with leaders, not, I mean, just a sense of integrity of our words and actions matching.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we are at a very critical juncture as a human race, and certainly in our country,
Right.
you
No,
know.
definitely, and it's a matter of I don't know, did we not pay too much? We didn't pay close enough attention to the internet, or how like that was informing us, or
Well, I think I think that is true. And I mean, I remember, I'm old enough to remember, like,
Mhm.
kind of before the internet,
Right.
and when it came along. And I remember saying to people, actually, because um I've done a lot of kind of shadow work in
Right.
healing work, and I do really believe in Jungian principles in terms of our displacing the shadow and objectifying, and
Mhm.
our shadow is really where our power is, but we have to kind of own it and integrate it.
Right.
And so I do remember saying, like, this thing has a shadow side that we can't even fathom,
Mhm.
because everything has a shadow side. So I think that, yeah, I think that we did neglect a lot. There have been a lot of things neglected, including public services. I mean,
Mhm.
let's, just healthcare
Yeah.
and education and infrastructure that, because we've glorified kind of these, you know privatization of things, and people
Mhm.
becoming billionaires, and we have a whole level of feudalistic capitalism, really.
Right. And there's a lot of, I don't know, a good chunk of the portion of the people that are, it used to be like, well, if it's on TV, it must be true. Now it's like, if it's on the internet, it must. And
Yeah.
being a person who, and a lot of people, like, I want to think people think like me, but like having been, being a writer and stuff, people can make shit up all the time.
Oh, well,
Like, so you're very
I mean,
careful.
to go to our other, not that we're going to get into the Great Dictator, but I mean, Adolf Hitler in Mein
Mhm.
Kampf
Yeah.
said, the bigger the lie, the more people will believe it.
Hmm.
And all you have to do is repeat a lie over and over and over again. And you
Hmm.
keep repeating that lie, and people will begin to believe it.
Right.
So none of what's happening in our world today, and none of the issues that I kind of grapple with in a satiric way, really, in Stormchaser. That was another thing that I was very intentional in writing the script, that I wanted it to not hit people over the head, that I wanted to tell a story with nuance and also humor. You know, I wanted there to be things that you could laugh about. Whereas
the thing of somebody thinking the salesman wants to help them. It's like they want the sale first, and we'll see about the help. But
yeah. So I lost my train of thought there. What was I going to say? But all of these things, I mean, they've been going on for forever.
Tale as old as time.
Yeah. And so I think that what we're going through right now is a reckoning, is that storm, that internal and that external storm that really is a part of Stormchaser. There's an internal storm and there's an external storm.
Yeah.
And we all have to kind of make a decision, right? Like, who do we want to be? And how do we want to create a new chapter, a new phase?
Right. Well, I think Bonnie Blue in Stormchaser, like I want to feel like she entered the Flip company like thinking she would help people instead, and then found that's not the goal. Yes.
I mean, I'll share a little backstory with you. In terms of like how I thought she entered, I mean, because it's not a part of the film, but Mary and I talked about the fact that I'm not going to share the whole backstory, but all these things that lead up to, many things that lead her up to this moment that we discussed. But she saw an ad in a paper for a storm chaser, and she thought it was to actually go chase storms. He shows up at this company, Flip Siding, and with all these guys, and and she needs a job desperately. And so Flip gives her a chance because Flip needs to make his quota. He's got Dawn Stuckey, he's got his person of color, but he doesn't have a woman, so he needs a woman. So he hires her. And so she thought she was actually going to be chasing storms. Then she realizes, oh, I'm selling storm supplies door to door. So I agree with you. She doesn't go into it with nefarious intentions. And certainly kind of from scene one, she's kind of like, what's going on here? Like, people are saying the products are cheap and there are questionable things, but I think like all of us who are sometimes thrust into situations where we need to make a living, we want to do well, we want to succeed, and there's stuff going around, and we're kind of quietly, unconsciously complicit.
Right.
And it's like something doesn't quite sit well, but it's like, oh, well, he probably didn't mean that, or, oh, that I'm sure that was just a one-off situation. But then, of course, as time goes on, it becomes clear that there's a pattern going on. And and she doesn't, there is a line in the film where she says, I don't care how poor I am, I'm not going to cheat honest people.
Right.
Which I'm not giving that away. I think that's also in the trailer. But even with making that choice, she's not perfect.
Right. And I feel like she goes through this whole thing of like, oh, well, this is what it is. And then maybe like, I can make a difference, or maybe I have to do it their way. And then she comes to her crossroads. Like, it's like like a whole whirlwind of things people have in jobs, relationships, all sorts of things. And it's culminated perfectly in like less than a half hour. Like it is.
Yes.
It works. And speaking of, you also have another cut of it called Flip the Switch.
Yes.
Where you re-edit it, you got it down to like 14 minutes. Same A to B, but kind of a different experience in the same. It's amazing because we talked this last time, but I want to bring it up again because I think it's fascinating. Because I always, you always hear we found this in the editing room, or we saved this film in the editing room. This one didn't need saved in the editing room, but you can find different ways to tell something just all this footage shot, scenes were in a script one way, throw it a different way. What was your motivation to do it shorter or make another cut?
Well, I made that other cut because, well, first of all, I had so many people telling me that I was insane for making a short film that was, 27 minutes. It's 27:12, and it will never get into any festivals. What are you thinking? This is a waste of money. It's like, what are you doing? And my first film, Happy Hour, was 14 minutes. So
Mhm.
I wanted to make, I mean, Stormchaser, of course, the script, in my mind, the story needed a longer period of time to tell it the way that
Mhm.
I wanted to tell it, although we'll get to flip the switch in a second.
Yeah, go
Um,
for it.
but I also wanted to make it as a proof of concept pilot,
Mhm.
because I do think that the material is rich for further development, which I've started doing, and to also as a writer director to show that I have the chops to direct longer form content. Um, Obviously, I'll be tackling a feature at some point, but
Mhm.
I could do Stormchaser. I would have had to
Right.
wait, a couple more years to do a feature at that,
Right.
funding wise, everything, time wise. At the time that I uh, left for pre-production, I actually left a big agency job where I was a senior creative director.
Mhm.
So I was working full time, writing well into the night, writing on weekends, living a double, triple life as I
Yeah.
have for years, to make a living and to practice the arts. Um, so um, so when I decided to do Flip the Switch, it was really like, well, if Stormchaser was starting to get some festival play, but I really didn't know. Now it did kind of take off, and we've been selected at more than 45 festivals, and
Mhm.
I'm very grateful. The film has gotten a lot of honors and awards in multiple departments. So it just goes to show, like, don't always listen. I mean,
Right.
hold on to your creative vision. And if you really feel that something's right, that was a big learning for me.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean not to listen and, be open, because it's a collaborative process. But I really cut the film as an exercise, and also to give it another avenue, because there were certain festivals that said to me, hey, we love this, but there's no way we can program this long of a narrative short. It's just not going to be possible. So I started thinking, well, let me see if I can go back in with my editor, Emily Chow, who's amazing. And, let's see if we can get this down to roughly 15 minutes. And it comes in at 14:51. But I learned so much as a writer and director, because um, yeah, I mean, the pacing, the structure, I mean, scenes are moved around.
Right.
And like you said, it kind of starts and ends in the same places,
Mhm.
but the character arcs, and I think some of the scenes even maybe take on a slightly
No,
different meaning.
definitely.
But it still works within the context of, I mean, obviously there's a lot of textural things. There's a lot of, I had to kill a lot of darlings, as they say,
Yeah, you got rid of, like, I
a
think
lot of things.
the romantic subplot's gone from the Flip the Switch.
Yeah,
It's hinted
it's
now rather than
hinted, but yeah, most of that's gone. And some of the other, there's some other kind of funny moments that are
Mhm.
gone.
I like
And
the
some,
yeah, I like when you took the first the adult introduction to Bonnie Blue, and you moved it later in the film, and it takes on it's like two completely different characters in different times of their life, and I'm just fascinated by that one little movement. And I think, I don't know if I liked how it like kicks into
the
gear the
father, you mean the father-daughter flashback
well, no, I
that,
was talking about the guy with the gun at
oh,
the
yes,
door. There's
yes.
completely different motivation there, and because one introduces us to a different person than the person we see later going to it, and it kind of kicks into that final decision a little more. And I thought that change was just like, I don't know which is better, but I'm just fascinated by its two completely different reads.
That's that definitely, that scene has very different reads. And I think the Bonnie selling the housewife
Yes,
also,
yeah, actually, yes, yeah. It's a lot
that
different.
is yeah, it's funny because some people are big fans of Stormchaser, and after seeing both films say like, oh, but I love Stormchaser. And then I've had some people who prefer Flip the Switch. I mean, it definitely is,
They're impatient.
it's yes, well, it's more of a traditional, I think it's more of a traditional short film in terms of the short films that we're used to seeing in America, especially.
Right.
Whereas Stormchaser feels maybe more like a feature length or a TV pilot. Like the pacing is not, I think short films now, we're just used to like boom, 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 the
Right.
pace. And I don't feel that Stormchaser drags. I mean, of course, I could probably now go in and say like, oh, I could cut a little there, I could cut a little there. But most of the time people, but it is a different, they're different, they're completely different films in many ways. Yeah.
Really.
So
sure.
it was a fascinating experience. And Flip the Switch is it's going to be in Mexico at Oaxaca Festival in June, and it's got a couple of festivals under its belt, and and Stormchaser, I think it's Stormchaser is now in the New York Women in Film and Television Festival.
Okay. And you have already won the AMC Networks along with the Starable Fest 2020, the winner of the inaugural Best Female Creator, which I'm gonna redub the Gretl Claggett Award from here on out. Since you're first, they should give it that name.
Yeah, that was a very cool. That was really cool and unexpected. I mean, I was just like excited to be among the nominees. So when I actually won the award, I was kind of blown away because AMC Networks, I mean, Mad Men was like a pivotal part of my television experience. I vividly remember that show and being addicted to that show and just being just blown away artistically. I mean, at that time, I didn't really I was writing. I mean, I've always been writing, but I didn't really at that time have aspirations to direct television or films. I always loved film and television, but I just, I've kind of, my career path has been very, well, it's been interesting. It's been, and of course, Breaking Bad. And I mean, they've done, in The Walking Dead, I mean, AMC Networks is, I think that, they are definitely groundbreakers in terms of what TV has become, really. And kicked off, a lot of this great television that we now have today that I want to be a part of.
There you go. And speaking of, you proof of concept pilot, Stormchaser, is Stormchaser, if it were to like go to a series, would it be would that short film be extended as a season, or would it follow after? Would it be a pilot where that's the first episode?
Well, I've kind of played with it a couple of different ways where it would be the pilot and season 1 would follow after, but maybe we would play back and forth with time as well, because we do have the younger Bonnie storyline, and we do have kind of that flashback in Stormchaser. So I think it could open up, and I always love playing with time. Or I've also thought about it as so I thought about it as a novelistic anthology. Where, kind of like a True Detective, or actually more so in the line of Fargo, right? Where, season 1 would be Bonnie Blue, Flip Smith, Don Stuckey, the world of Stormchaser. And then season 2 would be another metaphorical realm of disaster capitalism. So disaster capitalism, predatory capitalism would be the through line. I've also played with it in terms of being more of a short story anthology, like trying to think, like a Little America or Black Mirror.
Okay.
Different genre than Black Mirror, but
Right.
you have very different genre, but you have that you have that theme. It's all of the stories are integrated with a theme that runs through. For instance, Fargo, it's always, this is based on, this is a true story, and it's always, there's violence, and there's someone who is, someone feels done wrong by, and so they're gonna get revenge, and they have a simple plan that turns more violent than they could ever imagine, right? And it gets out of control, and as opposed to one person dying,
Yeah.
tens of people die. And yeah, so and I like that. I mean, those are hard to sell, honestly. So so we'll see. I mean, I'm very patient with this stuff. I'm not a very patient person, but I've learned with maturing, I've learned to be more patient, and I'm working on some other projects right now, developing, writing and developing.
Gotcha.
So I just feel like, if it's meant to expand out, I'm very open. I can see it going a number of different directions.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've played out other storylines for those other worlds, like the world of the prison, the world of education, the world of the military complex, et cetera, where there's predatory capitalism going on.
Gotcha.
And essentially it's people, like all of us, I mean, all of us are a part of the system, and regardless of, I mean, we all, I mean, even if we're trying to do the right thing, the system, and I think that's what we're realizing with things like the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, I mean, coronavirus, I mean, the pandemic, I mean, the fact that that's hit communities of color, harder. We're realizing the systemic nature of some of these problems and abuse of power within the system. And we're all caught up in it. And that's really, I think, what Stormchaser at its heart is about. Like, when you're caught up in a system, even if you're trying to do the right thing, sometimes you end up doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Right?
It can get the best person in the worst moment. Yeah.
So, and how do we rectify that, and how do we, and they're very complex issues that I try not to tie things up with a bow. And yet hopefully it gives you a catharsis, and there is kind of a somewhat of a closure, but I think it's kind of left open too.
Yeah, definitely. And I like your idea of the different, reminds me of like what Robert Towne was planning to do with Chinatown when because it was supposed to be like, the first one was supposed to show corruption in like the water power company, and then the second one, I believe, Two Jakes is oil, and the third one was supposed to be about the freeway system and showing, and I think like the second season of True Detective kind of touched on that, which I thought was odd. I'm like, oh, they're going where the third Chinatown movie was supposed to go, but that's what they're trying to show a systematic corruption and issues in it, and that kind of sounds like where you were going with the disaster capitalism in different places.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So we'll see. I did have somebody say to me one time, like, but who's going to really want to watch that? But it's like, well, yeah, I know. And it's not, of course, this is someone who didn't see Stormchaser.
Oh,
so, they didn't see, because it's like, it is entertaining. It's like,
I don't think like
or like, I mean, there's stuff out there that's like is dealing with some.
We need to get back to trusting the creator. Like that's one of issues I have. We've gone back to like the old studio system thing where it's like a producer driven stuff. People don't want creators, and I'm like, because some people are like, oh, they'll see something, I don't want to see that. I'm like, did you like this? Well, yeah, I love that. It's the same creator. Go see. Like you and I are both big Coen Brothers fans. We've talked about that a lot. And when sometimes they'll announce a movie, I'll be like, that's where they're going. Well, all right, I'm gonna be excited because it's their next film. But and then it ends up being like, 'cause I think when I read like when they first announced like Inside Llewyn Davis, what it's about. I was like, oh,
Oh,
really?
yeah.
That's what they're following up? Whatever.
Yeah.
And then I saw, I was like, wow, that was that was amazing.
I
So
know.
I
I
just
have the same
trust.
feeling. I have the same feeling that you do. There are
Yeah.
times where I hear that they're, and of course, I mean, there are some films that I am crazy about of theirs. And then there are
Hmm.
other films. I always enjoy watching anything that
Right.
they do because they're so Cohen-esque. They're
Right.
so themselves, you know, and I admire that. Some of them, of course, I find more entertaining or I'm
Hmm.
more into than others. But yeah, I will always, and I feel that way with David Fincher as
Yeah.
well. I mean, I'll watch anything that he makes,
Yeah.
and you know, uh,
I might be bringing up one of his later, but
Oh, okay. Yes, maybe. I was wondering about that. Yes. Um,
um, but no, I think like good creators, like good artists, when people are allowed to, not everybody's, some gals are cut out for the studio, shoot it stuff. But the creator, like, even their lesser efforts are still entertaining and fascinating, even if it's not a good movie. Like Dario Argento. I like him, and he's got some bad stuff, but it's still interesting to watch when I
yeah,
see it.
yeah. Well, I admire people who take risks,
Yeah,
and
that's mhm.
who aren't always, yeah, who where it's not just formula and kind of by the
Mhm.
book. Uh, I mean, there are certain rules of storytelling at times that you want to follow, I
Yeah.
guess. And there can be things that are so out there and experimental. All of a sudden, I do like a story.
Yeah.
I am very story driven.
Gotcha.
So there are times where I might feel like, okay, that was beautiful, but what? I don't completely understand, or
Yeah.
I do want to be moved in some way, whether it's to laughter, to tears, shocked, scared to death,
Yeah.
all of the above at once, and
Yes.
to feel some uh and I think, I mean, it's interesting in now starting to write with more of an eye toward writing a pilot and episodic. Um, I mean, they talk about protagonists in film,
Mhm.
that the protagonist in a film does change.
Yeah.
But in television, they don't change. They have that fault and they just keep, and it keeps taking it to new levels, but they don't intrinsically change, which I find to
Mhm.
be interesting, unless it's a limited series, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, and actually, kind of talking about Mad Men again, the creator of that, I remember hearing an interview where he was talking about how there was one episode that he wrote with Don Draper, like actually figuring something out and
Yeah.
kind of and AMC or the producers, whoever called and said, like, the script is great, but he can't. No, he still has to make the wrong choice. And Michael Weiner said, "Oh, I guess I love my characters so much that I want them to, he wanted him to
Yeah.
but but for television, Don had to keep fucking up.
Right. Yeah.
He had
That's
to keep
the
trying and then falling off the wagon. I'm going to be committed to my marriage. Oh no, I've fallen in, I'm in bed with this one.
ah.
So it's an interesting thing to be thinking about in terms of developing characters for television
Gotcha.
versus films, you know.
Gotcha. But before we go to the Great Dictator, I do want to talk your short film before Happy Hour, which
Yes.
stars Aaron Ruth and is narrated by Academy Award winner Julianne Moore. Also, something that comes from a poem,
Hmm.
which poetry came from you first, and then filmmaker. But how hard is it to catch something from a poem? This one is very personal to you, but like Stormchaser, like from a
Yeah.
poem. But is that where you like to start? Is that just happening now, or?
That just happened with these two
Mhm.
projects. this other 2 other projects I'm working on right now. Well, actually, I'm working on 3 different projects right now, and writing and developing, and none of those came from poems.
Gotcha.
But Happy Hour, yeah, I mean, I would perform my poetry a lot back during that time where my book came out, my book of poetry came out, and people always would come up to me after doing a reading, and when I would read Happy Hour, I mean, there would be gasps in the audience, and people would come up to me and tell me their stories. And so, yeah, I just decided to make a film, and I learned a lot doing it. I mean, and that film is actually structured so that the poem, which is I think it's 9 lines,
Okay.
lyric poem, is at the end and spoken
Right.
beautifully by Julianne Moore. And we kind of see the story, which uses a lot of horror tropes. And I know you're a big horror guy, you know, in terms of that kind of
Yeah.
iconic kind of Hitchcockian tropes.
It really has some strong visual styles going on, and it's pretty intoxicating to just take in and look at.
Thank you.
So-
Thank you. Yeah, it's mostly a silent film. I mean, you know, there's some music and some kind of low drone effects, and I actually wrote the script when I finally kind of figured out how I was going to tell the story that would culminate in the poem being spoken in a voiceover, with you're seeing things, images fragmented from the poem. When people would have to speak, I would give them, every line had to have a key word or a phrase from the poem. So that's kind of subconsciously in there that I don't think people
Super
catch.
clever. I didn't catch it till you told me that. I was like, oh, that's brilliant, and I feel dumb for not catching it.
No, it's
but
like,
then you don't know the poem to the end, so
you don't know the poem until the end, but exactly. But in my mind, so it was, I wanted, if anyone spoke, it had to be with something that would resonate at the end. And I do really believe in the power of energy coming, you know, like filmmaking to me is very shamanistic, I guess, in a way, you know, it's very like, I mean, if you think about it, the powerful visuals, the sound, you know, you take people into this world and you really take them on a trip, you know,
Right.
hopefully, right? And hopefully there is transformation in that trip that they go on. So, and because the subject matter of Happy Hour is sexual abuse, memories of sexual abuse, complicity and grooming, and I deal with unconscious and conscious complicity. And I wanted to bring people into something that was very kind of beautiful and alluring, this world that all of a sudden then becomes more and more, you know, it's a real life horror story. And a lot about how our memories, a survivor's memory can be triggered very easily back to a traumatic event. So sound, I mean, I'm a big sound, you know, I love sound design. I love
you recommended I put my headphones on to listen to it. I did, and there's nice little sneaky and
well done
stuff in there.
Yeah, and there's a lot of kind of that low drone, you know, we definitely or the clock, you know, the clock with the aunt who walks up the stairs.
Yeah.
You know, that to me feels very Hitchcock, you know, kind of, I mean, we were really going for some of those beautiful kind of psychological horror type shots and that atmosphere. I mean, I did Happy Hour for a very, very low budget. They had no money, begged and borrowed favors, but I think that it holds up pretty well, and it definitely is more lyrical and experimental than Stormchaser. Stormchaser is much more of a traditional narrative, but still has those kind of leaps of magical realism, if you want to call it, you know, in terms of, I love. And even though I came to filmmaking late in life, I mean, one of the things, and we'll talk about this with The Great Dictator, I mean, I grew up watching great films because my dad collected 16 millimeter films.
Right.
So I grew up watching like all of the classics, you know, on a big screen.
Mhm.
And so I was always, and then I started acting when I was 7 in professional summer stock. So that language of storytelling and cinema, I don't know, you know, it's so funny how life works. I mean, I remember when I first started writing poems, I showed a friend of mine who was working in television production as a coordinator at the
Mhm.
time. I showed her some of my poems. She wanted to see some of my poems and she was reading them and she said, Gretl, you should be writing for television. This is great. This is like, this, I mean, you could write scripts for television because
Right.
it was very, you know, there was dialogue in my poems. There was, you know, definitely metaphor, visuals, you know, scenes, because I was kind of taking from theater and all of this. But at the time, I just, you know, you know, we all come to things when we're meant to come to them, you know.
Mhm.
But I definitely had a foundation for the language of cinema, I think, just engendered from, you know, from my dad, my dad's influence on me with films. And then my mom was a semi-professional actress in summer repertory theater. And so I started acting when I was like 7 years old, and I was around
Mhm.
actors from New York and California who would come into this little town in Missouri and do professional summer stock. So it was, I was always breathing, you know, I was living, eating, sleeping, breathing stories from a
Yes.
very early age.
Yeah, definitely expressing them. And yeah, happy hours that you said, is it still, you said it was on Amazon maybe, or
It's on, yeah, you can get Happy Hour on Amazon
Mhm.
or on iTunes.
iTunes?
And I think it's like $2.99 to buy it. It's, you know, roughly 14 minutes. And all proceeds go to a few organizations that actually help survivors of sexual abuse and their families, as well as an organization that teaches kind of prevention to teachers and to parents of, you know, kindergarten age students and elementary school, because sadly, oftentimes that's when these things are going on.
Yeah.
You know, and I promise if you watch it, it won't hurt too badly.
No. I highly I highly recommend it. Like if I you know would have known you or been researching to come this, if I would have saw this just on my own, I'd have been immediately like, who the hell made this? And I needed, like, I want to watch other things from the like, it's got a lot, it shows a lot of your potential, shows a lot of your skill and talent, and then it's a powerful story, and it
Yeah,
translates in all sorts of elements of like film watching. Like you're just, you know, technically it's great,
oh,
storyline is
thank you.
great,
Thank you
lyrically it's great. So
Thank you.
definitely.
I mean, and it probably will be a subject matter that I, you know, that I deal with again in a
Mhm.
different way than Happy Hour, because I think it is something that, as a society, we still have a hard time, you know, talking about and looking at. But I never want to tackle these things in a salacious way or in a
Mhm.
way that um, uh, it's also, it's really, you know, it's not about, I mean, just people get really freaked out about this stuff, but it really isn't about the sex. It really is about abuse of power, which
Mhm.
is one of my major themes, because that's also in Stormchaser. So, you know, there are certain themes that I think run through my work, even though Stormchaser is a very different film than Happy Hour. But hopefully, I don't know, hopefully my voice, you know, there's somewhat of a consistent voice, I think,
Mhm. Yeah,
in the
no.
two, even though they're different, very different.
Oh no, it's yeah. There's definitely, you're building. When we have your whole library of things, it's gonna be like, oh well, this is where she started tackling this, but it was back here. Well, actually, she first tackled it back here in Happy Hour. You didn't see Happy Hour? Oh man, let me pull that out. So
Oh,
let me get the Criterion Collection Gretl Claggett set out, and we'll show you.
Oh my goodness.
Happy Hour was a bonus feature on her first feature-length film.
Right. Oh, from your lips, as they say, from your lips, Brandon.
There we go. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got a spot ready in my collection.
Well, I'm writing up a storm, and I'm going to keep creating no matter what.
All right. Excellent. Look forward to all of it. All right. You want to move to The Great Dictator?
Let's go.
All right.
Absolutely.
Man. Yes.
And you
all right.
have Charlie Chaplin as our special guest.
I know he's either a fun prop or creepily looking over my shoulder for people. Who knows?
Yeah, we better get it right.
Yes. So The Great Dictator is written and directed and stars Charles. Let me start over. The Great Dictator is written, directed by, and stars Charles Chaplin, and joining him in the cast are Jack Oakey, Paulette Goddard, Reginald Gardner, Emma Dunn, and Maurice Moscovitch. It's about dictator Adenoid Hinkle tries to expand his empire while a poor Jewish barber tries to avoid persecution from Hinkle's regime. Notable, it's Charlie Chaplin's first talkie, and while he plays the barber, he wants it to be clear it's not the tramp who's behind me. If you're watching this, if you're listening to it, I got a Charlie Chaplin standee behind me, and they're very tramp-like in it, but the film,
but more nuanced. I think, tramp, right? I mean, more realistic.
Right. And I feel like the film kind of wants to say goodbye to the tramp in the opening, because the opening is a full-on lot of pantomime. It takes place in what would be World War I. We've got fake countries and conflicts going on here, but I feel like it's kind of his nod of the hat to I'm going to do other things, and it's very tramp-like. It's a lot of silent, pantomime comedy was saying. There's a lot of war stuff, but it's really impressive, the war he puts together on film, and he's got good model work. The comic, like, there's that huge cannon. There's a
cannon,
joke.
And the way the cannon follows him.
Oh yeah,
the whole. I mean, all of the shtick is done. I mean, it is that very kind of farcical, trampy kind of. I mean, his I guess vaudevillian type. I mean, it's the physical humor is so brilliant. But I think that's a really, I think that your point about that, I never had thought of that, but I think that's a brilliant point, Brandon, that's kind of a nod to, like, okay, it is World War I, and most of the film takes place during World War II.
Yeah.
But and the poor barber, of course, gets amnesia. So he's away, and he doesn't even know World War II is going on when he comes back to his barber shop. But there is that definite kind of change in tone, even though there is some still broad humor.
It's more of a detail than a force, like I'm trying to think of the right word. It's more of a detail than the mission statement or something like that. It's like,
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
My words are, I probably said it great the last time.
You did. I was stumbling before.
You were in awe. We had to take a 5-minute break. You're like, what brilliance. What brilliance this guy's talking here. Oh, let's take a break. Like, it's like like his comedy's there with the barber, but he's more of a straight character. And there's like a different kind of comedy that comes with Hinkle when he plays him. That's still Chaplin-esque, but kind of, I don't know, doing a different thing.
Well, I was kind of surprised about how subtle and nuanced some of the humor is. I mean, you do have that broad humor, but then as Hinkle, he's got, and even the barber, I mean, he's got these things where he just throws these lines away, but they're hysterical. I mean, it's just like, well, he just kind of tosses it, but it's so funny. And he's at once funny and terrifying as Hinkle. I mean, there are some really, like, moments where you're like, ooh. And I think that before we had talked about how that World War I chapter ends with the plane crashes, and then it's Schultz, right? It's Schultz, who becomes
He
an
saves his
advocate
life, yeah.
later, in the film. But they say we lost. He's
Yeah.
like, oh. And of course, as we know historically, when the Germans lost World War I, that sent them into a tailspin of that then made the country and the people ripe for fascism.
Right.
And for a great dictator, because they didn't have money to eat, because they were this war-torn country and in a great recession, and all of these problems, and so the country was ripe for someone to come in and say, I can fix this, and it's the Jews' fault. It's
Right.
they're the ones causing the problems. And so, as we know, what happened in history. When again, remind me again, when was The Great Dictator? It was made.
So it was made, I think
before?
he started shooting it in 37 or 38, and it released in 1940. So this was shot, conceived before the United States entered World War II. And it's really weird, like reading up on this and watch it, like the odd state that the world was in, just sitting and watching Nazi Germany and not wanting to, let's not touch it. And there was people against Chaplin doing this film. Like, why are you going to do that? And it's really weird. Like I teased earlier, David Fincher's Mank touches on kind of the personality of the time. And there's, if you haven't seen Mank, there's been a lot of like, nah, Mank, but I think it's just the don't want to put my phone down crowd, or maybe not into film history type crowd. But there's a brilliant scene at a birthday party in Mank where they discuss the Nazis and what's going on over there casually, as if it's going to go away, not be their problem, or, oh, that guy, like, it's like, because one, they probably didn't realize the extent of what was going on over there, and they just kind of laugh it off. Well, and it's I think David Fincher was brilliant into lulling people into thinking this is another Hollywood movie about making movies, when he's got a lot to say in there that he hides. But that's one of the things, is the discussion of Nazi Germany. And I was like, why does this feel like this conversation could be happening today? Oh my gosh. And then this movie has a lot of themes that sadly feel timeless.
Absolutely.
And relevant.
And I think that it's important for people to know, or maybe they know when they listen to your podcast, but you asked me to pick a movie.
Right. Yeah. I normally started out like that, and
and so I grew up watching The Great Dictator because my father, who collected 16 millimeter films, would show that. And I probably watched The Great Dictator for the first time maybe when I was around 5 years old. And it became one of my favorite films. And it was always like, even when I went away to college and I would come home, that was one of the films that I would request for my father and I to watch. We would have a couple of movie nights with double features, and my dad would splice together newsreels.
Oh, yes, this is
remembered. So he would splice together newsreels of the goose stepping and and showing scenes from concentration camps. And then, of course, on the back end, we would have like Betty Boop cartoons. But in terms of The Great Dictator, I do remember when I was a little girl being fascinated with the scene where Hinkle, there's that funny thing where it's not Herring, it's the other one who says, we have to get rid of the Jews, then we'll get rid of the brunettes. And he goes, oh, the brunettes are worse than the Jews. And he says, yes, but first the Jews, then the brunettes.
And it's like all my beautiful Aryans led by a brunette.
And so he builds him up, and he's like, oh, you're scaring me with, you're talking about me in a way that scares me, is basically what he says, but in a more clever way than I just said it. And then he says, I want to be alone, which was a, kind of a nod to Greta Garbo at the time. I want to be alone. But then he goes into this fascinating kind of dream ballet as Hinkle with this globe that is like a balloon. And he's like, dancing with the globe and making love to the globe. And of course it builds to a crescendo
Right.
where it pops. But I remember as a little girl, like that scene, I was just riveted by that scene. And it's just such a brilliant, such a brilliant piece of filmmaking in terms of, it's such a brilliant satire all the way around.
Well, that globe scene is almost like he was a playful child at one point. What happened? Like,
Well, exactly. And you see, I think that's the thing, is even with his Hinkle, who we all know who Hinkle is, and we know
right?
all
Yeah.
the horrible things, and he does say and do horrible things in the film, but there's also very funny moments, and you see this like wounded little boy.
Mm-hmm.
You really do see that wounded little child, and like, what happened to this guy?
Right.
Um,
One of my favorite comedic sequences that shows the destructive, like, rapid fire life he's living is when we first get him in the office and he's doing some paperwork and he gets called and he has to go check out a bulletproof suit test that doesn't go wrong. He's like, and there's the great line, like, how long? He's like, it'll take 2 minutes. I'll give you, or like, I have time for one, or you can have one. And then he goes immediately to this sculptor making a bust of him and a portrait. And then he's got to leave that real quick and go play. He like goes plays piano. And then he sees a science experiment of a guy that's got a parachute hat that doesn't work. And it's funny.
And does the guy jump? The guy jumps and like,
Yes,
"Well, that didn't work. Oh, keep working on it."
Which
like,
is funny
people are dropping dead.
because Hitler was obsessed with weird things like trying to just, who cares, experiments like that. And we just see this rotation of that. And that's obviously his day-to-day life when he's not out speaking. So he must love being out speaking because he's not in that, taking advantage of it. But that's great comedy right there with just his
Oh yeah, it's really it's a classic, and then the whole and then the way that he's able to manage these tonal shifts with like the Paulette Goddard character, who does bring in more of the heart and more of, and then the love story with the Jewish barber, or what about the scene with the coins where they're eating the cake and he's like,
it's a suspenseful comedy, like who's gonna have the
but it's really also reflecting on how, as much as people say like, oh, I'll fight for my country, when it comes down to it, they're like passing the coin, like, I don't want to put my life at risk,
well, like, the guy's in the extreme Hinkle Nazism, and that's his way he knows to do it, and he brings it upon them. They're like, that's no way.
And then of course the ending, which is really chilling now, when the barber is taken for Hinkle and has to get up and speak, and that last speech that he gives is, when I watched it, I was in tears. Tears because it was so timely, and as we were saying earlier, it's even more timely now with what happened last Wednesday, and what's going on in terms of things that are happening in this country that I guess, all of us, I guess, are shocked by it. I'm not surprised by it, because we've been kind of leading up to this point, but like, where do we go from here? Are we going to repeat history? And of course, Chaplin was making this film, I think, to say like, hey, that speech at the end about machine men, don't be machine men,
right?
And this whole, it's really an anti-fascist, it's really a deeply humanistic, like, no matter our race, our religion, we're all human beings. We should help one another. We should, it's so beautifully written and so beautifully delivered.
Right.
And here we are in the same place.
We don't learn. People love movies. They love messages like that. And then they don't take. But I was thinking this, like this, a person like the end speech, he's meant to be that. And Chaplin digs down. He gives you that look like, do you remember the kid at the end when he's got the like teary eyed, like they're back together, and he like delves into that emotion right there that I'm like, oh, that's drawn back to that. But like, does a person like that like, even if they give that speech or something, like, do they deserve redemption? Like, that's the, do you believe them? I mean, the people, his opposers aren't going to like, are they going to believe that? Does it transpire to them? We only see how it affects really his relationships that are on the other side of that
Right,
thing. But
well, they cheer. I mean, he does show that huge crowd cheering.
right, that's true. Yeah,
here.
right, that's true.
But yeah, we don't, and I, and I love the way the film ends on her in the field, and of course they know it's the barber speaking because it calls out Anna, right? It's Anna, the character's name, Hannah or Anna. Now
Hannah.
Hannah, that's
Hannah.
right.
Yep.
I didn't get to rewatch. I watched it 2 weeks ago and didn't get to rewatch it. But when she just says, "Listen," and he just has that beautiful close up on her, and she's, and it's such again, just I'm getting chills. I mean, it's just such a just spot on, perfect way to end the film. But you're right, we don't know I mean, I've been wondering, when Trump came out and gave his speech, when was it? Was it Wednesday? Was it Wednesday night?
Yeah, well, no, it was Thursday.
No, it
I
was
think
Thursday.
it was
That's
Thursday,
right.
the day after, because his
Thursday.
speeches
right.
on Wednesday did absolutely nothing.
Right. It was Thursday when he came out and said that people would be held accountable and that whatever he said about it was wrong. Yeah, on Wednesday he was telling people to go home and that he loved them and they were special. I don't know. Have no words for that. But
None. Yeah.
yeah. But I wonder, and I don't know if you've heard about this, but I wonder, like, how did some of his hardcore base followers react to that speech? Like, did they feel betrayed? Because he didn't take any responsibility.
Well,
he basically said, you're, you.
I've seen it, they don't believe it. They think he was either a force or they're going deep fake. They think it was a computer, and it's like, I believe he was.
Are there theories that
oh yeah, those people will find a conspiracy in anything, and I think part of the thing is, it was shown and edited in such a way that I'm like, oh, he was forced. It's very clear he was forced to do this, and it was multiple takes, and this is against his own will. Because, and in defense of that, for me, look at his Twitter right after. He went right back to saying the opposite on Twitter, and now he no longer is there.
Yes.
But yeah. So, and his wasn't one of unity. It was just like, I was bad because they said I was bad, and
Oh no, I mean, you can't compare it to and of course in the Great Dictator, there's with the great, any story that has like the doppelganger, the twins, it is the barber, not Hinkle speaking. Hinkle would never say that speech. And I guess, sadly, I don't know. I'm trying to think, are there historical figures who have really turned around, who have been, one way and turned around and said, I saw the error of my ways, or let's give peace a chance. Let's, I can't think of any off the top.
They usually double down. I don't know. No.
And I think it's also, and I don't know how, I don't know how we do come together in terms of, I mean, it just seems like in the United States now we have two very different realities going on. And so how do we come together, and how do we work together? How do we recognize each other as human beings? It's become so um, ugly. I mean, just the way people even talk to people,
Right.
like some of these, even around the COVID stuff with like, I was looking at some videos of anti-maskers
Yeah.
in LA, who went to the mall and the Ralphs, and they were attacking people who were wearing masks and saying vile things.
Oh yeah, that was horrific at the Century
Yeah,
City one. Yeah, and I can't believe it's happening there. Like,
I know.
if that's not safe, like, oh, like I'm
I
in the Midwest. I expect something like that happens somewhere, but Los
But in
Angeles in
Los Angeles, Beverly Hills
yeah.
area, I know it was really, and I think that was after we did our first
Yep.
record, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And it was just really, that was so disturbing. And like, I, I mean, honestly, and I have kind of said this, and people cringe when I say it. But even with Donald Trump, for instance, just to harken back to Stormchaser and kind of giving Flip Smith,
Hmm.
some of those lines, and he definitely, that character kind of embodies a certain type of person with a certain type of belief
Right.
system,
Yeah.
right? We all have our belief systems, but I really think that, we all do have a little bit of Trump within us. I mean, we all have, archetypally in energies, like we all have shadow sides, we all have these things. And I don't see how, and that's the thing with like a leader like a Hitler, or, Mussolini, who's,
Hmm.
like all of these dictators, or these autocrats, or these, when we have these extreme things, I think it's because collectively our consciousness, we all have that within us, and it's coming up for us to kind of look at. And so like, I have to own those parts of myself that, now I'm not saying that makes it us like it, but like, I think that the only way that we can find common ground is to recognize that we are all human beings, and that none of us are perfect, and we all have belief systems, and that we see some sort of good, and also can, I don't know, it's like our consciousness has to shift to a place, but it gets really
Right.
hard when it's fanaticism, when people are clinging so tightly to
Yeah.
something. And if you don't believe exactly what I believe, then you're evil, or you should be hung. I mean, the fact that people are calling for Mike Pence to be hung.
Right. I don't like Mike Pence. I live in Indianapolis. But I don't wish that upon the man.
No,
Like that's just, yeah, it's awful. And yeah, I think I mean, these people have developed into something that isn't even the party they claim they're a part of anymore.
well,
It's
yeah, I think, and that's where the Lincoln Project, of course, that grew out
right.
of, because I mean, that was founded by Republicans who said, like, wait a minute, I'm a Republican, I believe in this party, but this is not the Republican Party.
No, no, it's
This is not,
they got a whole big mess on their hands.
oh yeah, yeah,
But no, it is, and it's always there's those voices, and it's just the one that clicks with everybody. Like, and then they flock to that, and that's the one that creates the movement almost. And it's weird, like going back history. If you want to go back to like Jesus Christ,
yep,
he was one of a many prophets down the street. He's just the one that clicked with people.
yep,
Historically, that's what I mean. Come at me with your religion, whatever. But we'll call him historic Jesus.
yep.
That's what it was. Like there were prophets all out speaking, and he was just the one that the words clicked and the people followed. And guess what? He was a political target. He was not popular with oh,
Oh yeah, no,
stuff.
he was
So
not.
yeah,
He was not popular with the government,
yeah,
and yeah, I guess I don't know. We are in very interesting times. I think the sad thing is that it is history repeating itself.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean,
It's right
you
here.
know,
Like you watch a fictional film that wasn't even to the worst of World War II yet. I mean, the concentration camp in this thing is basically a penitentiary.
yeah,
He gets letters there. You can't get,
no, there
you
were
wouldn't
no
want to
letters.
mail your letter. Like you
There were
imagine
no
some
letters
Jewish
in
person,
hell.
some
Yeah,
Jewish person in Germany writing a letter to their concentration camp. Like
right,
that's not getting delivered and don't put your return address on it.
right.
Like, yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
but he also said had he known the horrors of what was really going on, he would never have made this film.
Oh, did
Eh,
he say that?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And I mean there's stuff like even beyond Trump, there's the stormtroopers. It's like it
Yes,
reminded me of Black Lives Matter. The problem with that going on, just the way the abuse of the police system, and these are soldiers, but
yes,
also with more recent events, these are guys that don't think there are consequences for their actions, just doing stuff, and I don't think anything's going to happen to them. And
right.
then after that war, oh crap,
Yep.
well, I was following orders,
I was following
doing,
orders. Yep, yep.
and
And it is funny how, Chaplin does uh, the acting style in that they're kind of like thugs, it's like that kind
yeah,
of tough talking, what are you going to do about
yeah,
it? I mean, it's like
I'm a
it,
German.
yeah,
Come on,
yeah, I'm a German. Yeah, yeah, you with the badge. Yeah. And even when she talks back to them, she kind of gets that wise crack and broad voice on,
mm-hmm.
which is an interesting choice because it kind of contextualizes that type of brutish behavior of these little fiefdoms, people,
Right.
the sergeant who has power, or in the World War I thing where they're going to check the cannon and it's like I think the one guy says like, check that out. And the other guy says, check that out. They pass the buck down the line,
Right.
Go see about that. Go see about that. Nobody's going to put their ass on the line. It's like,
No.
oh, you do it. You're beneath me. You do it. So he really, I think, because that's the thing too, is that, yes, Hitler,
Mhm.
any of these leaders throughout history who were dictators, who did awful things, people followed them, and
Yeah.
then people took that power and used it and abused it within their little community,
Mhm.
whatever that is, whether they were in charge of a little town or, I mean, I think the last time we talked, I brought up that film, The Reader, which is based on a
Right. Yeah.
book.
Hmm.
And I haven't seen that film in a long time, but there is this just moment where you're like, oh, because the lead character who Kate Winslet plays, she is brought to trial, and she had been a Nazi, working at a low level. And I think that, as I remember, I might be remembering this incorrectly, but I believe that what her crime is that she locked a bunch of people in a church or in a building and it was burning and she just let them burn.
Hmm.
And so they asked her, like, why did you do that? And she said, I was following orders. And there's this moment where she's like, what would you have done? I mean, I was following orders, and you see how she really had been like so brainwashed,
Yeah.
I mean, another great documentary, I haven't thought about this in years. Did you ever see that documentary, Blind Spot, about Hitler's, it was about his, I think about his secretary.
No,
Um,
no. I did see Blind
who,
Spotting, which is a high recommend from me, but
oh
has
yes,
nothing to do with Hitler. But
yeah, right. But I think it's called Blind Spot, and it's
Mhm.
also and it is a documentary, but also very chilling in terms of they interview, and of course they were very old at the time, and this Blind Spot, I'm sure, was over a decade ago. I don't remember when it came out, but you see just kind of how they people, well, that's the other thing that people are talking about too. It's like now there are Republicans kind of saying, oh, I think that he's not in the right mind. And of course, you have a lot of people like Stephen Colbert and
Mhm.
other people saying like, oh, just now you're figuring that
Right.
out?
Yeah. Like, oh yeah. Now jump ship
Now?
2 weeks before. Well,
Right.
that's
What
what I
about
had
the
to.
last 4 years of some of the things that have been going on?
Well, I applaud the most social media platforms for booting him off. How
Mhm.
different is that than all the people resigning right now and going like, oh, he's crazy now? It's like, yeah, you had plenty of stuff that could have, and you were going to probably do it after the 20th anyway. But it's like you're the tech equivalent of these people resigning.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And what's happening, like what happens with the transition too? Like
mhm,
that's the other thing is like with people leaving and of course there have been people who were let go and
right,
replaced in in the not far away past that's happened intentionally um in terms of this transition and making sure that Biden and Harris and that administration has the proper information. I mean,
right.
that's been a battle. I don't know. I don't know. I think that so this is actually coming out on the inauguration day,
No, this is Monday before. The
the
Monday,
Monday
Monday
before.
before the
Got it, got
18th. So we got a couple days.
it. So we'll see. Yeah. So then we'll see. Yeah, I mean, I do think that anyone who hasn't seen The Great Dictator, I think that it's currently playing on HBO Max. I
Okay.
know it's part of that. And I'm sure you can probably get it on Prime or rent it for not
Mhm.
too much. But I just think like,
It's on a Criterion Collection Bluray
there you
as
go.
well.
There
Yep.
you go. I it's just amazing how timely it's breathtaking how
Yeah.
timely it is and how it just resonates in a way that I mean I still laughed out loud. I
I,
laughed out loud. I cried.
right.
I
I
cried.
mean, it's got brilliant stuff. Like they portray, like I really like one of the things I noticed I didn't talk about in the last one, but
Yeah.
now you get it here in this second run. But Hinkle he's only shown as idiot as his idiocy is only shown within his inner circle. When he's out with people, it
Yes.
never comes out. And
Yes.
also he's so scary. The sound of his voice frightens people. There's a scene in The Village where the barber and Hannah go on their first date and he comes over the PA or something and they clear. They clear the
Yeah.
town.
Whole street clears out and there's there like
Yeah.
he's buying a flower for her and the vendor's gone. Yeah.
Right. And
It's
and, and they got to find hiding and all that stuff, which is a nice touching point because the next time she were to hear the dictator over the megaphone is at the end when she hears the speech, and it's a
mm,
resolve, it's a comfort rather
yes.
than the fear of what they had
Yes.
before of not having present. But it was a nice little call and response there.
And in the first scene that we see him, he's actually giving a speech,
Yeah.
and you remember that, and he's talking, and he's doing the whole, like applause, no applause,
Right.
applause, no applause, which I found funny with, I certainly didn't model Flip after that, but as you know, in that
Right.
Flip's opening scene, he's doing this big kind of call and repeat, and like,
Yeah.
stops all the guys with
Whether it be a political
with
movement or
that.
office place, that
Exactly.
is a
But
thing.
it does have that feeling of, kind of a rally going on.
Hmm.
But there's that great where he starts, oh, the Juten, and he's spitting and the microphone like bends.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Like he's like,
Like,
and the microphone is like bending. I mean, that's like brilliant,
right. He
in terms
studied like footage and footage and footage of Hitler and to mimic him, to get his vocal cadence down, everything else. And I think if there's one thing that maybe dates it that a younger audience would like is the fact that he's poking fun at the German language. But it's
yes.
not so much he's making fun of like an actor today would learn it and be able to speak it fluently, but he's not so much making fun of the German language, he's making fun of Hitler and
Yes.
the way he talked and throwing in crazy words just because Hitler was saying crazy words, but his might be salami or
like
you know,
the Mussolini, salami,
Mussolini. Yeah,
where
but
they, yes, yeah. Well, it's part of that very sardonic humor. I mean, I don't think
mhm,
he's making fun of Germans. He's making fun, like you said, of Hitler and
yeah.
of that. I mean, the interesting thing too about Hitler, I have read, it's been a while, but I have been kind of fascinated, I guess, because I grew up, and I have, I had German Jewish relatives who were in concentration camps,
Mhm.
on my mother's side, and my dad spoke German, and uh, so that kind of Germanic, I've always been kind of interested in that, and the psyche of that time, and Hitler. There are theories that Hitler would become possessed when he would speak.
Oh,
Um, and if you look at some of the old newsreels and things, and I don't know whether this was conscious on Chaplin's part, but after when we see Hinkle in that first scene, and he's just like, he's a little guy, as
yeah.
Hitler was a little guy, but he's like larger than life, and the microphone's bending, and the
Right.
crowd is under his control with like, and then starts them applauding again with like a little wave and then stop. But when he comes off stage, he just kind of not collapses, but he does kind of become this very like, was that okay? Like this kind
Yeah.
of, and he's got all of his, his henchmen, who are like, oh yes, it was wonderful. And they're whisking him away. And from accounts that I've read, some people really, I mean, apparently he would almost collapse after some of these speeches. And they
Oh,
would say that he was this different personality than when he would speak. And it was almost like he like channeled a demon or something. Like he would find this, and if you think about it, like
I got some to
actors,
add to that. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, okay. But I mean, if you think about it, when actors, there is
Right.
this thing where you're acting, you are really channeling energies, and you do kind of become possessed in a way.
Hmm.
There are different forms of possession, but I have read theories that some people think that Hitler was actually channeling a demon.
Okay. Now, speaking of channeling demons, I've actually heard like so, um, not not my favorite person in the world. In fact, I don't. So I have a friend, Tucker Carlson.
Oh,
I have a friend. He's probably one of the most liberal friends I've had in life. Always been. His wife works over at Fox News. I don't know what she does, but he's met and says he's a really nice guy off the camera and nothing like what you see on there. But when the camera comes on, evil. And
interesting.
he's like, it's a show. But to me, no, that
Yeah,
I don't excuse that. To me,
yeah.
what I see, that's what he's delivering to people. That's his power in life, and I don't approve of it. So even if he's nice off the camera and he's just selling something and being a character, no,
Yeah.
I don't think that's forgivable. But it's interesting to know that that's what
Well,
it
I mean,
is.
I think that, I mean, even Marilyn Monroe in a different way would turn it on. She would say,
Right.
like, I'm not Marilyn Monroe but she could, like, in a blink of an eye become,
Hmm.
she could walk down a street and not have people recognize her if she wanted.
Right.
And then she could just shift something energetically, and crowds would be like, oh my God, it's Marilyn.
Yeah.
So, but to your point, I agree. And this is something that I think about when I'm writing and creating, is like, what's my intention and what do I want people to get from this? Because I do think, I mean, yeah, I get it. Like, we all have to make money, we have to make a living, but like,
Yeah.
what are you putting out into the world?
Yeah.
Right. And we are responsible for that.
Right. Exactly.
And I don't believe, and you'll hear people say that about, like, people in business sometimes,
Mhm.
there'll be somebody who's just, just horrible at work and mean and nasty to people. And then they'll be like, oh, but he's a really good dad.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, actually, we're holographic. Like who we are in one thing is kind of who we are in everything. So yeah, you might show different different
Hmm.
sides, but still like I there are splits, I guess, split personalities. We all have splits within us. But it doesn't excuse like, oh, well, but he can get away with that because he's a really good dad.
Well, that's the point. Like Scott Mendelson, my friend, writer for Forbes or whatever, one of his early talking points when we were first getting to know each other, like, gosh, long ago now, like maybe 15 years ago, he always pointed out they always have these characters. It's like, oh, he called him, but he cries at the opera. That type of character, like he's so evil, but he cries at the opera. And they also like he's this awful guy, but he loves his kids. It's like one, he should, and that's everybody does. Like that doesn't
Right.
get you off the hook. I mean, you can be a serial killer and still love your kids. You're still murdering people. Like that's not enough to
Exactly.
to bring it
Yeah.
back down. But like, because it's a common thing. It's like, oh well, it's easy for people to relate to that, but it's still not, and that doesn't excuse it. So
No, exactly. Well, hey, everybody thought Ted Bundy was a nice guy. I mean,
that's right. Yeah. Oh, smart guy. Good guy. Have a beer.
He was such a gentleman. He was so nice.
And you
I mean,
can't ask the people who didn't think so.
exactly. They're not around to tell you.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So hopefully, I don't know. I think it's also this thing with excusing bad behavior.
Mhm.
And, I think that, I mean, sadly, when, and I know we're going to talk about Testify and, kind of go back in time a little bit, but like if we go back to the Great Recession,
Mhm.
2008, and some of that, I mean, most of those people who were responsible
Right.
I mean, they got away with it.
Right.
They got away with it. And I think that we are at a time where, I know that as of today, impeachment papers have been filed, right?
Right. We're on the 24-hour Mike Pence isn't going to do anything notice.
Yeah. Have we? So is Mike
That's
Pence?
last I knew. They were holding it off because they were giving him 24 hours to invoke the
Right.
25th.
So we'll know tomorrow. Chances are he won't.
No.
Although I did read or hear something a little bit earlier today that it wasn't completely off the table.
Well, he said he wanted to give the appearance. It was important for him to give the appearance to our allies and adversaries that our government was running and functioning. I'm like, dude, they know what's going on here. To show them that you would take action, to show them that it was fine, you would take action rather than trying to be a lifeboat coming to shore, convincing people the Titanic's on its way in. No,
We're not sinking.
yeah.
Yeah.
We have news. Like that's one thing I think the Republican side of things has failed to notice is we are in an information age and we know things now. We see things. We aren't afraid of the other hemisphere, other countries, because we've interacted with those. We know they're not scary because they're strangers and maybe they look different than us and speak a different language. We can communicate with them via the internet and stuff. There's no mystique over a lot of things. We have records of things. We read things. Reporters can find out more stuff without having to dig deep. And they act like it's still the 1980s. It's
Right.
not. You can't, and that's where Pence lives. This? It's like, no, we know what's going on, dude. Like, we know you're ignoring our phone calls. We know I've been with that man as a governor. I know how he works. He's very old fashioned.
Yeah.
And it's no, he wanted to create a news network here that he controlled. Luckily that didn't happen for us, but he made us quite an embarrassment for a while. But yeah, so that's kind of how they work, but the information, but I guess that's the last I saw. That was his current stance, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think that regardless, it's like we can't just turn a blind eye. I mean,
no, we can't just say he's gone in a couple days.
Yeah, we can't keep turning a blind eye. And I mean, if that happens, then it will. I mean,
like if you were working at Target and a guy gave us 2 weeks notice and then hit a customer in the face and then stole 3 TVs and a bunch of PlayStations, and you're like, he's out in 3 days.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
He's out in 3 days. Like, no, you can't. Or he told his friends to come in and do that.
Right.
And they're his friends. You saw him outside telling everybody to do it. That's more apt. There you go. And then you're like, oh, he's out in 3 days.
Yeah.
It's fine. We don't need to call the cops. We don't need to. We
Just
can let him. He's got 2 more shifts. Let's let him do it. No, you can't. You can't do that. We need to set a precedent. And while it sounds like ridiculous stuff like that, it can go beyond what the replication. There needs to be some sort of consequences dealt with, and it doesn't matter whether he's out or not. There are things that can happen after that are beneficial.
Absolutely.
So.
No, it's and I mean, we have to start calling things by their proper name, like sedition.
And keep arresting people that were there inside the cap. Like, maybe don't go so hard after the people outside, but get all the video and people you can that went inside.
Yeah, and I think that they are doing that, and
my favorite is the zip tie guy said, I picked him up off the ground and I was going to hand him to a police officer because I didn't know what to do with them. Wish I wouldn't have picked him up now. I'm like,
oh, I didn't hear that.
Right. Sure. He's like, that was the biggest mistake I made that day. Aside from being in the Capitol and sure, you didn't bring him in with you. Someone else's course. That's how you play it. Right.
Mm-hmm. Man.
But yeah, that's a great dictator.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Great dictator.
I put it in the masterpiece category. I think Chaplin's made a bunch of masterpieces. I think he's someone, if you're into films, you want to make films, he's one to study. Like him. And I think, later on, we've always talked, I've always been a proponent of that, like that Jackie Chan is like the martial arts Charlie Chaplin. So if you're into Jackie Chan and you've never checked out Chaplin, check it out.
Oh, interesting. That's an interesting, that's
one of Chan's biggest inspirations is Charlie Chaplin. And Buster Keaton and stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm a bigger Chaplin fan than Buster Keaton. I mean,
right.
Buster Keaton, of course, was great, but I agree with you. It is a masterpiece, and I think well worth the watch. Right now, for sure, because it will resonate. It will
unsettle you.
It will unsettle you, and it is funny. It's entertaining. As well as very informative. And as my father would always say, and of course he did not make this up, but he would say it a lot. He would say, the only thing that we learn from history is that we don't learn from history, which, I keep hoping maybe one day we will. I think that we do individually. I think that we do at times individually, in certain individuals.
Right.
I like to think that I have at times. I'm sure that there are times where I haven't. I know that there are times where I haven't, because I
think we tend to take giant steps back before we make a nice move forward. It tends to be like, things seem calm, like we're getting somewhere, and then a huge step back, and then
yeah. Well, sadly, I think you're right, Brandon, that it's human nature that it's like we have to be brought to our knees before we go, like, okay, I need help.
Right.
I mean, it's that thing of yeah, we're in a big step backwards right now, it seems. But I'm hopeful that we'll make it. If we can make it through, I think it is going to be a couple of years I think it's going to be a rough and tumble couple of years.
It doesn't end on Wednesday of this week that this episode drops. It absolutely doesn't. I'm hoping my prediction of our going to be former president just doesn't go back ever to try to get in, and he's just obsessed with his rallies, and he goes from Boys to Men in the 90s to Boys to Men now, where people keep falling off and they end up being casino performances.
Right.
That might be, yeah.
I think that I think the great state of New York, where I am located here in New York City, I think that probably the state of New York is going to be knocking on his door.
That's what I'm.
And the state
I
of
hear.
Georgia might too now. I mean, there's some other
Mhm.
states that might, but yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, he's of course talking about starting his own social media platform since he,
Which I believe was his goal. I think he planned to lose. He didn't think he was going to win 2016, and was hoping to start his own news network and stuff.
that's right. That's right. Yes,
So
yes, yes, yes. I have heard that.
yeah.
Well, stay tuned.
Maybe we'll already know this when this airs. Who knows?
Exactly. No, probably not. Probably not. We'll know more, but
Right.
the story will continue to unfold for a while, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well,
Uh,
now we'll move on to what else. This is kind of things we've watched, read, listened to, or maybe put out in the world recently. The essay, something we're working on,
yep.
anything like that. So, Gretel, what else?
What else? What else? Well, I really kind of had my head down writing. Uh, it's kind of a metaphysical thriller, which is something that's very different for me.
Okay.
So I've been working on that. I've been reading a lot about conspirituality, um, and so how there are these groups of kind of new age people who, with QAnon and things like
Right.
that, that it's not just far right, that there's actually a far left population who really see Trump as a light worker and
Mhm.
who are really following, these. So there's been some interesting stuff written about conspirituality and about narcissism in the new age principles. Now, that doesn't mean
Mhm.
that everyone who follows new age or who's spiritual, actually, I had a friend who used to say spiritual. She liked to say the word that way, spiritual. I'm spiritual.
Spiritual.
Spiritual. And I'm trying to think, like, you know what I did actually? I did end up binge watching Russian Doll again.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
And it's only 4 hours. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I was, and I was kind of multitasking, but it's so good. It's so good. And also just, in this kind of, in alignment with, like, very different than the Coen brothers, but in alignment with The Great Dictator and these things where dealing with, like, tough subject matters, but
Mm-hmm.
with humor. So yeah, I'm trying to think what else. I mean, of course, I've been watching the news and, just trying to make sense of everything that's being thrown at us right
Last
now.
week was like, welcome back, election watchers from
Exactly.
election week.
Exactly.
We're here.
Yeah, and happy 2021.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Like, we're back.
Yeah. So what else for you, Brandon? What's going on?
My one thing I want to touch on is I recently, this past weekend, I watched the movie Duel, which is Steven Spielberg's first film. It was a television movie, but I decided, like, I had a hell of a week. I put it in Friday night and I passed out to it, and so I was like, the next day I was like, you know what, I'm going to show this to my son. Going to show him Duel because he has seen he's seen the Indiana Jones movies and Jaws and Jurassic Park. I actually, fun thing, the first weekend when we were on lockdown, wanted to do something fun, so I had a little film festival for them, and I did
Nice.
4 movies, and I made tickets. I made a poster with times that they started, and made snacks to go with each, and had pizza at the end of the night. And what did I show through that? The first one, Hard Day's Night. That was a, like, roll the dice. They loved it. It was one of their.
I love that film. Oh my goodness, I love that film.
They love it. They like the Beatles a lot, so I was like, let's show them a movie with the Beatles. And my wife was not that into it, and she was just bemused at how the kids were, like, loving it. And then it was, I think I went animated. I showed them American Tail, the Fievel movie, from my childhood, and then I showed them Moonrise Kingdom, the Wes Anderson one. I was like, because they like Fantastic Mr. Fox, so it's kind of quirky, and that one's all ages. My wife loved it. I can't believe she didn't see that one. I could go to the theater alone, so I maybe didn't take her.
And
But
I'm a Wes Anderson fan.
Oh, yeah.
I also like, I mean, I don't love all of like Moonrise Kingdom. I have to
Mhm.
check that out again.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't one of my favorites of his,
Mhm.
but I just respect the fact that he just like he has such
He's
a
got his own yeah.
singular voice, and
Right.
so and so I always want to see what he's doing. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, and then the finale was Jurassic Park, and
Ah,
that one frightened them. They were like they're 8 and 6,
okay, I was
and
gonna ask. Okay,
she
yeah.
was 5, so she was 5 when this happened because her birthday's in May, and it was effective. She's like, "Why did you?" I'm like, "Because I wanted them to watch it when it would, have that effect on them," and
Yeah.
I'm like, "She's like, why do you do that?" I'm like, "Because they're gonna chase that. They're gonna chase that feel. They're gonna get a little older." They're going to watch it again. It's not going to be as effective, but they're going to want to find the next thing like that. You have to have that experience, and that's a safe
Yeah.
one to do that with. And then I showed him Jaws. I thought it was safe because I showed him Jaws a couple years before that. My daughter loved Jaws. My son was kind of like, ugh, blood. So then I brought it back to Duel. I'm like, you should see the first movie from this guy. And he liked it. He thought it was pretty effective. My daughter came down like a little ways, maybe after the first act, and she was drawn into it. And then she got tired and was like, "I'm going to bed. What is this on an app?" I'm like, no. I was like, I looked up because she just got a TV in her room, and I was like, no, it's I looked up, it's not, but I'm like, it's the Blu-ray we're watching. She's like, can I borrow it? Because I really want to see the end of it. And she was like into it. I was like, wow. So watching it, I'm just like amazed at how already there the guy is, for one. And that movie is a TV movie with giant movie camera angles, cuts, everything else, and it's just so if he makes a chase go the whole film effectively. And my son was like, wow, you never really found out who the guy in the truck was. And I was like, that's the point. That's how scary it is. You never know. And it's not about that. He's like, well, I didn't, that guy didn't, the main character didn't know much. I'm like, well, he started out, you remember that phone call he had with his wife? And he's like, yeah. And I go, he was talking to his wife. They had a fight the night before because they had a party and one of their friends harassed her and he didn't stand up for her. And that was part of the fight. Like, yeah. I'm like, and you notice he's kind of put offish the whole movie. And then he finally learns to stand up for himself at the end when he goes again, he decides to quit chasing and goes after the truck guy. He's like, oh yeah. It's like, yeah.
So he got it.
He
So
got it there. I had to throw it
and
there, but
so he's 6 and your daughter's
he's 8.
8.
He's 8 and my daughter's
He's 8.
6.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I decided to throw Duel on. And I was like, all right, because I hadn't seen it in a few years, probably since the Blu-ray came out. And I was like, I just felt like, I don't know why I felt like throwing on Duel.
Yeah.
But
I've never seen that film. I have to
you
check
have?
it.
Oh
No,
yeah.
film.
It's his first movie. It's available to like rent and stuff. My daughter was asking if it was on one of the free streaming apps because
Right.
she's got her new TV. Don't mess with her.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's
Duel.
funny because your kids are I have a godson who's 7 and his brother, and I'm Auntie Gretl to both of them, and his brother is 9. So very very close in age
Gotcha.
to your children. And it is funny because it's like they like, I understand what you're saying about the Jurassic Park, because like Luke, my godson who's 7, he's really getting into reading graphic novels. Like he had Dracula, and I got him for Christmas, I got him Frankenstein. And so he's and they like scary movies, but he'll get too scared at times.
Okay.
But then he'll say like, oh no, it's scary, but like, I mean, it really freaked me out, but in a good way.
Yes, exactly. No, you have to, like, that's what got me. Like one of the things like that made me so passionate about the film and stuff is the way it would make me feel. And being a horror person, that's like a drug that you're searching for that high again. And you do find it at times in different places. But now that I'm going to be 39, I more appreciate the craft and the intention more so than it does scare me. And I talk to a lot of people, it's scary. I'm like, how old are you? Like the world is what's scary to you now. Like life is what's scary. So nothing's
scary right now.
Yeah.
But I love that. I love that you're like sharing films and your passion for film.
I like to give them I don't want them to grow up thinking like old, and because my parents kind of got that way. I'm like, you grew up with that, and you like laugh, but like, um, I want them to have, I want them to see practical effects. I want them to see like old puppetry, and I want them to see CG, and I want them to see like everything, so they can just understand the heart of like storytelling in different ways, and not be afraid because something's in black and white. Like I shown them Chaplin. They like Chaplin. Like I showed them Chaplin in the Marx Brothers early age, and the
Okay.
Universal classic monsters. Like so they love the classic monsters. Those have been my son since he was like 3, because I always make a tradition after trick or treating.
Uh-huh.
We come back and I show him a new horror movie he hasn't
Oh, I
shown.
love
I kind of raise the bar every year on him. And the one year I showed Frankenstein, but the grave robbing at the beginning freaked him out. So I said, okay, we will stop it. He's like, but I want to watch, so I put in Dracula. Love Dracula. So that one. But then he went back to Frankenstein after Dracula, and then he got all into them. So he's into those. He's into, and he's got his own stuff too that I don't understand. I hate that. Like, I'm gonna be a dad that understands his stuff. But I'm like, I don't like that.
I know.
It's not for me.
I know. I know my boys, as I call them. Yeah, they'll ask me, have you seen this? And I'm like, what? I don't even know what they're talking about sometimes, I have to share a funny thing that I think it was on New Year's Day. I found out on New Year's Day that that Stormchaser like got first place dramedy for at the New York Women in Film and Television short festival, and I won best writer and director, which was lovely.
Yeah.
And it was a great way to start 2021. And all these things. I mean, it's such hard work, as you know, and you have to overcome so many challenges that when you kind of get like a, hey, good job, keep going, it means a lot.
Yeah.
So I was wishing them a happy new year. And then I said, oh, I have some good news. And I told them about the award, and because they think it's really cool that I write and direct. And
it is cool. So they don't think they know.
Yes. So, and they both, I mean, they love movies. They love movies. And I think that Owen definitely has a proclivity. I think that, he might want to act and direct down the road. I mean, he remembers movies verbatim, and he'll act out scenes. So we've made some little home movies and stuff. But Luke says to me, he goes, so Auntie Gretl, wait a minute, how long is Stormchaser again? And I said, oh, well, it's about 28 minutes. And he goes, oh, so really you're like a director in training. Well,
if Stormchaser gets 2 more awards, they'll let me make something that's 40 minutes. Exactly. And then after that, I get to 50.
Yeah. And Fabiola was like, no, your Auntie Gretl is a director. She's a writer and director. She goes, Luke, feature films are a lot of money to make. Like,
right.
Films takes money. So like, we gotta find somebody to fund her feature, but it was just so funny because he just said, how kids are. I mean, he's like, so really you're like a director in training. Yes, I have my training wheels. They're like, because he recently got a bike. Well, actually for Christmas, he got a bicycle without training wheels. So he finally he was able to ride a bike. So they got him a new bike. But yeah, so I'm in the process of getting my directing training wheels off right now. Yes.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, that's good. And once you get your training wheels off, I can't wait to see what comes of that. But that'll do it for today on this episode. And Gretl, when I say thank you, it weighs like a ton, because not only is it like a joy to share time and film with you, but to come back and redo something we already did with like no hesitation and the more enthusiasm, like that's just amazing. Like that doesn't happen. Someone's like, let's do this again. I've been there before. This isn't my first rodeo with having to re-record. And like thank you. Like that's
Well,
just
thank you. I mean,
awesome.
I love talking with you, and I would love to come back again down the
For sure.
road. And
Yes.
yeah, and thank you for for all of your great insights and for your support of me
Thank you.
and Stormchaser.
Mhm.
I do really appreciate it, Brandon.
Hey, thank you. No, keep putting out great stuff. Like keep you in the sport, even if you don't. No. All right. So where can people keep up with you around the internet, social medias?
Yes, social medias. So I'm on Facebook, Gretl Claggett, and Instagram, Gretl Marlena. I was actually named after Greta Garbo and Marlena Dietrich, my
Very nice.
dad's two favorite actresses, both also German. So yeah, Insta is Gretl Claggett, and Twitter I'm not on as much, but that's at Gretl Claggett as well. And then
Neither is Donald Trump.
yeah, right. I have not been banned though.
Yeah.
I'll have you know. At
There
least
you
not
go.
that. And then my website is my name, Gretl Claggett, GretlClaggett .com.
All right. Excellent.
My email, yeah, GretlClaggett.com. So you can find links to all of, to Happy Hour, to Flip the Switch, to Stormchaser, and some other work. And if anyone wants to shoot me a line, there is a contact. You can email me through that
Gotcha.
site. Yeah.
Excellent. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Brandon4KUHD. My written work is at whysobblue.com. There's more from the Brandon Peters Show this week, but until then, always remember to keep the positivity in your online film chatter.
Thank you for listening. The Brandon Peters Show is a Creative Zombie Studios production. Produced by Brad Shoemaker and Brandon Peters. Written and edited by Brandon Peters. Announcer vocals by Jessica Alsman. Theme song by Metavari. Web design and show art by Brad Shoemaker with Brandon Peters. All music and clips featured in the episode are property of their respective studios, and no infringement is intended. Additional information on this and other episodes at BrandonPetersShow.com. For any inquiries, press opportunities, or sponsorship, contact mail at BrandonPetersShow.com. The show is available on Apple Music, Spotify, or anywhere podcasts are found.